National Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the National Fire Radio podcast, a podcast that is designed to talk about the job. I'm the luckiest guy alive. I get to interview the coolest people out there in the American Fire Service and talk about the job. Everything from guys riding backwards, officers, chiefs, up through companies, people, manufacturers, products, organizations, you name it. We're trying to capture the stories to promote the job and make the job better. So if you're returning and you're a regular listener, thank you. If you're new to the podcast, check it out and let us know what you think. Podcast at nationalfireradio.com is where you can find us. Send us an email. Let us know what you think about the show, people that you think might be a good guest, or anything else that you want to talk about. Send it over to podcast at nationalfireradio.com. We'd love to hear from you. And what we get to do is bring forth the word about the job. But in order to do that, we need the help of some sponsors. So do me a favor, hang tight, and listen to the words from a few of our sponsors. This episode's brought to you by Box Alarm Grills. When your apparatus arrives on scene, are you making the best showing? Looking to set your rig apart from everyone else? Want your engine, truck, or rescue to be easily identifiable? There is a solution. With large aluminum grill numbers and full-width rear mud flaps from Box Alarm Grills. Formed by Danny and a team of fellow firefighters, Box Alarm Grills gets it. They know what it means to show pride in your ride, delivering the quality construction and design that fire departments demand. That's why their grill numbers and mud flaps grab attention, enhance visibility, and make your fleet recognizable on scene while responding or just driving around town. Built in the USA by a family-owned business, Box Alarm Grills is quickly becoming the choice of fire companies, apparatus planners, and fire truck manufacturers with out-of-the-box or custom solutions. Check out functional, durable grill numbers and mud flaps from Box Alarm Grills today at boxalarmgrills.com and on Facebook and Instagram. And like Danny and his crew like to say, add pride to your ride. Taylor's Tins. Taylor and his team have been manufacturing aluminum helmet fronts since 2017 with over 200,000 shields in the market. Taylor's Tins is a leader in the American Fire Service helmet front space. Not only do they manufacture helmet fronts, but they do so much more. Locker tags, key chains, CO monitor charts, medical kit charts, pump charts, banquet awards, you name it, they do it. Go over to taylorstins.com and check out what they can offer you today. They've become a longtime sponsor and good friend of the National Fire Radio podcast, and because of that, they offer a promo code at checkout. So when you go to taylorstins.com, enter NFR Sent Me. That is NFR Sent Me, and you'll get 15% off your checked out order. It works on all stock items from taylorstins.com, including quick tins, license plates, locker tags, and much, much more. Exclusions do apply. This is a company that prides themselves on quality and customer service. From the inception, from your design to out the door, it's within 48 hours. Nobody else is doing that. They can't do that. 48 hours to get your shield out the door to you, to put it on your helmet, and get to the next job. Anyway, check out taylorstins.com. Again, that's taylorstins.com. Check out their latest offerings and use promo code NFR Sent Me. That's NFR Sent Me for 15% off on your checkout. And in the words of Taylor and his crew, stop burning up leather. Hey, everybody, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. This week's going to be a great week. I got some heavy hitters, and we're starting the week off right with Lieutenant Auggie Matt. Auggie, thanks for joining me, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. This is an exciting one for me. You and I got mixed up a few years ago for your training conference, which we're going to get into, which is the Heavy Rescue Conference. You do that up in Syracuse, New York. And I was lucky enough to sneak in on an overnight and walk the grounds, the training grounds that day. And it was a lot of fun to see a conference that has real specific gearing towards heavy rescue specialties. Everything from metal cutting to man versus machine to vehicle extrication to ropes to rigging. I mean, you name it. It's any heavy rescue discipline out there. Your conference is designed specifically for that. It was pretty cool to see.
Yes, trying to keep the nitty gritty. You know, we've been to tons of conferences over the years as students and have taught a few others as well. And we were just kind of looking for that. We felt something was missing. You know, we're looking for that nitty gritty, like you and I were talking about before, kind of like those nitty gritty articles and topics that we you and I used to read about when we were brand new.
100%, man. I love narrow focus because I think we get more out of it. I think too often in the fire service, we paint with broad strokes. And when we do that, we're trying to hit every demographic, every type of firefighter, every type of discipline. And I think what we're doing is then, vanillaing out, if you will, the message. And I think narrow is better. And certainly focusing on the heavy rescue conference and those disciplines, you don't find advanced metal cutting at many conferences.
No, and like you said, I think the broadening is good for entry level.
Yeah.
For like your first 5 years when you're finding yourself.
Exposure.
Whether volunteer or career.
Yep.
But after that, like you said, trying to hit the focus and narrowing the, an area to focus on and perfect.
So let's break it down real quick. So a little bit of intro, 20 plus years in the fire service, 15 as a volunteer, 19 as a career fireman. Currently a lieutenant on Truck 8 in the city of Syracuse, New York. I got a couple stories about Syracuse. My brother graduated from Syracuse University, so I happen to know that area and enjoyed myself on more than a few occasions up there.
I'm sure it's not hard to do up here.
It's a good town, man. It's a lot of fun.
Yes,
you were the senior driver for the rescue company for many years, promoted out in June of 2020 to a lieutenant spot, rode the engine for a bit. You took a staff job, which I want to hop into because I think something real important came out of the staff job, which was a program that you developed with a partner of yours, another lieutenant, the professional development program, which I think is really interesting, and I want to hop into that conversation. And then you came back out, and now you're riding the truck, and that's got to be a lot of fun for you as well. So sounds like a hell of a career over the last 20 years. And Syracuse is a fire town. I mean, you guys do work.
We do work, absolutely.
Yeah. So break it down for me. When you came into the fire service, was rescue, because you rolled into the rescue conference, and it's because of your influence riding the rescue company for so many years, I'm sure, and furthering your own education, which is going to be a big theme of our conversation today. But all of it, what was it all about for you? Like, what about the fire service when you came into it was what was the hook for you? Do you know?
Well, for me, I first started out living on the east side of Syracuse, and this is kind of really going back to like bicycle days. I'm going to really nerd out for a moment.
Do it.
We had some family friends on the job. I didn't really know much about it, the fire trucks, whatever. Well, you'd start to hear sirens, and I'd ride my bike to the end of the street, and there's a big main thoroughfare called James Street. And one day I saw this monster of a rig go flying by, and this thing was so loud, I could hear it coming from downtown.
I love it.
And long story short, it was the heavy rescue. It was Rescue 1. It was the Salisbury. There's a picture of it out there. It was their tandem Salisbury with an International Paystar 5000. Real monster.
It was a monster.
Beautiful
Absolutely.
rig.
And you guys were orange back then, like a orangish yellow color, right?
Like a safety yellow. Yep.
Yeah.
We went to that in the 70s under Chief Hamlin. And we were still that up until around 1990. I think it was 99, 98, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
But yeah, so I saw that monster and kind of intrigued me. I didn't know exactly what it was about. Fast forward a bunch of years, we moved out of the city to the east side. My best friend, his father was a volunteer one of the fire chiefs in the fire department. And so I always saw this fire SUV, as we joke about now, in the driveway, and I had no clue. Well, I became, of age, 14 years old, and they had an Explorer program up there. And that's really where it started as far as getting my foot in the door in the fire service. And one of my mentors, who was a former chief there and, fire instructor and all this stuff, we talked about two things specifically, and they've stuck with me forever. And that kind of, drove me to where I am now. He talked about focusing on incident command and command structure and command presence and rescue work. He said those two areas right there are really where it's at. If you're, he could kind of probably tell I was a little bit of a wild child, but, he said those two areas right there, if you can focus on those two, if you enjoy them and you have like working with your hands on the rescue side and the mechanical aptitude, he said that's the angle you want to head towards. And as time went on, my entry level type stuff, taking extrication courses and written stuff like that, just totally intrigued. And then, obviously there's some tragedy. We had 9/11 in 2001,
right?
In September of 2001. And then 6 months later, my own town, we experienced a line of duty death of two firefighters.
Wow.
which was horrible.
Yeah.
And, I could have done the easy thing. I could have been like, this is not for me, very dangerous. Saw the effects of 9/11, but I decided it was for me. So I kept going. And then I went to University of New Haven in Connecticut, and a lot of the guys I went to school with, their fathers passed away in 9/11.
Okay.
So just became entrenched with people with the same mindset, and just kind of went off into the rescue world, just heading that direction. And then when I got hired on the job, when I worked in the department prior to Syracuse, I worked in the Manlius Fire Department. We were a combination department. The daytime staff, we depended heavily on mutual aid, and you were it. You didn't have many options during the daytime. We had
Right.
2 transporting ambulances, so we did a lot of everything. Car wrecks, very limited technical stuff at the time, but
Sure.
it was a lot of you had to learn some of this stuff really fast.
Yeah.
And then I got into Syracuse, and very regimented, which is awesome. And we were always watching the rescue guys at different alarms, and 2 of my first bosses were former rescue guys, so that's kind of where it kept going from there.
Yeah, and I got to think too, starting at 14, right? With that influence at such a young age. You did say it before, the broad stroke's important for your early years, right? Because it broadens
Absolutely.
your horizon to all the different things that are available to us as firefighters, right? And go ahead, please.
And it's crazy because, in this day and age of liability, and there's been a lot of, I know junior programs of that sort have taken a lot of heat based on things that have happened over time. But I truly believe, because I'm a product in that program that I was in, I know people that were in that program, that another one is a career lieutenant as well, not in Syracuse, but actually in the same department that we started in together. Good friend of mine through high school, and that I truly believe those programs are the way to get people. And I know there's different programs now through
Sure.
schools, and I actually teach at a community college as well. But you got to get them young. It's that time frame when people don't know what they want to do in life, obviously. And I know there's some people that change, their course of work. They may have worked some other areas and then decide this is what they want. But I truly believe if you can get people young, and catch on to that motivation of helping people and making a big difference in your community.
I also think it does. I think the fire service does so much for the individual when you can grab somebody at a young age and they're impressionable. So many guys I talk to were like, hey man, I was from a rough town, I was a rough neighborhood, I was a rough kid, I got involved in stuff I shouldn't be doing, and the fire department was something I was looking for, and it came along, and it just happened to come along in my life, and it influenced me, and I come to find out that I needed the fire service in my life. And I find that those conversations and the people that tell me those types of stories are some of the best firefighters I know.
Honestly, and a lot of my friends, same way. If it wasn't for the fire service, we'd either be in the military for a bit,
right,
or in jail.
I mean,
there's really no other options. I mean, I didn't particularly like, high school.
Yeah.
A lot of us that want to get into this field are really kind of hands-on. And when I was going to school, it was like, you got to go to college. It was
expected, right? Yeah, it was that era. I grew up in the same
era.
You didn't
like,
really
you're
have
not
a choice.
Going to get a job at McDonald's without college, and that's just the way it was at the time.
That's right. But I find that really interesting too, because I'm very much the same way, and we're gonna talk about furthering education in a little bit. But a lot of times, like, I grew up as a kid that tinkered all the time. I was always outside. I was always building things, constructing things, breaking it down, rebuilding it, and so on. So it was very hands-on, and the mechanical aptitude that you talked about earlier, very much in my life. Like that is what I do and how I move forward in life. I'm a tinkerer, and I like to build and construct and engineer and all those things. And I'm sure you're very much the same way, knowing you and your discipline in the rescue services and all that. But like with that, a lot of those kids aren't book worthy. They don't want to study. They're not into schooling as much, formal education, if you will. Their education looks different. But as we get older and mature, we start to find our way back to the studying and further education, and that becomes more important to us, no?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, it kind of adds, well, you know how it goes. There's the practical application, which we learn through experience and skill sets, but there's that theory as well. And there's a happy medium there somewhere.
I think so. I think you're right. Absolutely.
Actually, Bob Pressler said something. I saw the quote maybe a couple months ago, and he said, you know what? A statement or an action without practicing it is just that, theory, so tying that back into what we're talking about, it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
But it's so true, because you learn stuff entry level as a firefighter, and you fire one and all the other courses you take, and then you do it for X amount of time. Well, then that theory becomes more reinforced, and that applies as you go up, and even laterally, depending on what you do, if it's special ops or become a driver, instructor, whatever, I just feel that, I don't know. It just, there's something to be said for it.
Yeah, I think over time, you can teach me how to do something mechanically, right? And I pick up on it, I get it. But then it's the back end of it is all right, he just showed me how to fix it, but why do I need to fix it, right? And then
the why is really the answer.
Why, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think over time, with experience and maturity, you come to want the full answer and not just the end game, right? You want to know why it needs to be fixed before how to fix it. And that to me is a really interesting. I literally just had this conversation with my 15-year-old daughter last night, because she's a straight A student and she's bombing geometry. She hates geometry. Crushed honors algebra last year, straight A's across the board. Gets into geometry and she's drowning in it and hates it. And it's because of her mindset and where she is with it. And I had to explain to her about, what she hates about geometry is learning the theory behind all of it and so on. And I said to her, you got to embrace that. I said, that's life. And as you get older, you're going to have to embrace all of that. So I get it. So let me ask you this, right? So you get into the firehouse. Now, you made a comment to me earlier about Syracuse. And, your love for firefighting was with you as you came through. The effects of 9/11, the line of duty deaths that occurred close to home, those are all things that make that job very real for you. And so then you get into Syracuse, you get hired in a town that's a fire town, and you go through the academy. You were saying that all the recruits that come out of the academy go to engine companies.
Yes, we all go to engine companies, and, as time has gone on, I think that's extremely important.
Talk to me about that.
I know guys all over the country, and some of them have started on trucks and, just different models and different types of departments, and which is great, but at least here for sure, it only helps, to understand and truly experience, the fundamentals of firefighting being, extinguishment first is great. And not everyone, if people want to go to, a truck company or whatever, that's great. But if they don't, they can still stay on an engine if they prefer, but it's a very important job.
Well, I think the basics of engine company is needs to be instilled into everybody coming out of the academy, right? I mean, those are your foundational blocks of the American Fire Service's extinguishment, right? And from extinguishment, we do everything else to support the mission of extinguishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So from there, you're riding. Now you're like, okay, I've been exposed to things early on in life, the other aspects of the fire service. And so you're going through your years as a firefighter in Syracuse, and you find your way to the rescue. I mean, I'm assuming that childhood memory of that International Salisbury jamming up the road every day, was ingrained in you. And so the rescue obviously then was probably just a no-brainer for you.
It was a goal. I had put in a transfer. So the cool part is my first boss was a captain down at Engine 8 when I started. He was a former lieutenant and firefighter from the rescue. And my first district chief had been on for eons, worked at some of the busiest engines, but also worked for a long time at the rescue. So they just conversations about, they would tell stories or just conversations about, different things just kind of inspired me to want to, we looked up at these guys too. You go to alarms and they have these salty helmets and mustaches. You know how it goes.
I do. I get it.
When you're young, I got hired in Syracuse at 21. So when you're a young, very impressionable kid, you're like, holy cow, these guys are the real deal. You go to fires and you see these guys come rolling out of places. You're like, wow, that's aggressive.
That. I love how you're painting that picture though, because I believe that, right? And Yeah.
it's still very real for me, even though, it's been a few years now, and as sad as it sounds, you start looking around and a lot of the people that you looked up to have retired and moved on or promoted or whatever. It's like, man, to me, it's still, I feel like I just got on yesterday.
Yeah. Is the rescue a spot you'd like to get back to now that you're a boss?
Oh, absolutely. I always
Yeah.
want to go back.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I was there for 12 years and, yeah, it'd be a great place to return if I could.
And
But
it's
life is good right now as well.
no, I get that for sure. I mean, absolutely. You're back to a company that you wrote on originally too, I think, right? You said?
The same house. I'm
Same
on
house.
on
Okay.
truck 8. I started on the engine there, but same house, same shift. Really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so through promotion though, right? Now you promote out of the well, before we even get there, it should be said that the heavy rescue in Syracuse is exactly that. It is a heavy rescue company that is an urban city rescue company. So can you just give me the
Citywide,
give me the breakdown on it.
rig. When I started down there, we rode with 7.
Wow.
And then we were
Loaded
reduced
up.
to, oh yeah, we had a small, like a chase rig called Rescue 2, which helped the engine companies with trauma and different other various alarms.
Oh, okay.
But we were reduced down to 6 in 2011 through a series of cuts.
Okay.
And then changed firehouses. But so it's broken down basically into 2 search teams, for a basic fire, 2 search teams. And then the boss and the driver are very flexible. The bosses, they start out as outside positions, egress, forcible entry, ladders. They're the initial RIT crew behind the truck company that shows up, just trying to make sure things are moving along for the search crews. And the first search crew, team 1's going to go to the fire floor. Team 2 is going to go to the floor above. They're going to do their primaries. And then their goal is to do the secondary in the spot that they didn't do the primary. So kind of check the other person's work, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
But
And you're
it's very regimented. It's awesome.
and so when you say citywide, you're assigned to all working fires in the city, right? And then
Every working fire, every tool job, pin job, auto extrication.
right.
Actually, they do get dispatched on the majority of the car accidents with injuries present as well. And then every elevator incident or emergency they get dispatched to
Got it.
as well.
Do
So
they have their own?
It's a busy place.
Yeah, they have their own first due assignment too, or no?
Nope.
Okay, so it's just a citywide, depending on type of run, etc.
Yeah, they'll typically go with an engine company on a car accident. But yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So let me ask you then. I mean, with a company like that, with all that action and the excitement that's happening there, and so on, hard to promote out.
Well, extremely.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I actually worked on the same shift for 12 years. And actually the senior man, we were together the whole time. And then another guy, we were together for 11 years. So it was very hard to promote out. And the other thing too is like the conversation you and I had earlier.
Yeah.
Everyone has different motivations, and some people promote because they want to move up. And I always tested. I didn't score too well, but everyone has motivation. Some people are trying to promote to escape, a current assignment.
Sure.
In some cases.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't the case. So it was like, well, if I don't promote, darn, I'm still here.
Yeah. Right.
So, it was definitely different leaving, but
yeah,
also a new chapter.
Well, and that's it, right? I think sometimes a new chapter is it's exciting, and the unknown of it or what you can do with it. And then going forward, I mean, you promoted, you go to an engine company for, you said 6 months, I think you said, and then from there you found yourself in a 1-year staff position. Talk to me about that a little bit.
So I was approached by the administration about helping another lieutenant create a professional development program. And at first I was like, I don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it was with the right person under the right command staff, knowing those guys when they were firefighters, and knowing kind of their background. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. 'Cause I'm not really, I wouldn't consider myself one to be behind a desk, so to speak.
I get it.
But it was the right place, right time, the right people. So the fire chief, Chief Mons, had this vision of a professional development program. And you and I were talking earlier about this as well. Kind of where it started is using a handful of different organizations, and they were talking about this type of program. And in New York State, a few years ago, the state statute actually changed where the career fire chief of a department has to hold national certification in Fire Officer 3. And kind of the fire chief's thought was, well, we should try and meet in the middle here because our first line supervisors or lieutenants, they get Fire Officer 1 when they start out. So, sooner or later, accreditation and certification isn't going anywhere. It's just increasing. His thought was, well, let's try and meet in the middle because you still have captains and district chiefs and deputy
Sure.
chiefs. And of course, why not raise the bar? We always talk about, sadly, in the fire service, and this is a sidebar conversation you and I talked about a couple of years ago. We always talk about the minimum standards.
100%.
Right? We never talk about the maximum standards, which is why I think part of the problem with the broad strokes of the brush, so to speak, for the fire services, we talk too much about the minimum standards and not the maximum. But so his thought was, we could have a guide, and we have digital and, a physical copy, but kind of a guide to go horizontal in your fire service career. If you want to, because like I said, we all started out at engines, it was different course loads, stuff like that. If you want to go to a truck, squad company, rescue company, maybe go to hazmat, become an instructor, EMS, whatever the case may be. Kind of a find yourself, so to speak, as a firefighter. And then from there, you can also go vertical to become potentially also fire investigation was in there, and codes, fire prevention, but also you can go vertical as a lieutenant, captain, district chief, deputy, and so on. Obviously, we have civil service tests to contend with to move up, but different course loads to kind of coincide with those levels.
I mean, so there's so much here, right? I want to unpack this a little bit because there's a lot here, right?
There's a lot, yeah.
So the fact that your chief of department and your command staff is looking to get away from a minimum standard and go to a maximum standard, right? A maximum. Sky's the limit. We want you to do better in your job. We don't want this a job. We want you to make this a career. We want you to buy in on us, and we're going to buy in on you type of attitude, right? Which I can only think was part of your decision-making to take that staff job then, because like you said, there was no reason or want to ride a desk, but to have management and administration tell you they want to better you and better your firefighters, right, in your department, it starts at the top down. And so that had to be really exciting for you to say, once you figured out what they were looking for with this professional development program, that had to be really exciting. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Anderson Rescue Solutions. Anderson Rescue Solutions was founded in 2016 by former Philadelphia firefighter Tim Anderson. As an urban firefighter and rescue specialist, Tim found that the equipment available to him lacked the usability and practicality in complex, high-stress environments that rescuers often found themselves in. To combat this, he developed products based on his own experiences in the field, creating innovative, efficient gear designed to thrive in reality. The multi-loop rescue strap is a perfect example of one of these products. Made in America, this patented tool is used for rapidly harnessing firefighters or civilians in the worst conditions. Every feature is fine-tuned to meet the needs of rescuers battling low visibility, low dexterity, and high stress. The multi-loop rescue strap has been used in numerous real-world rescues for both firefighters and civilians all across the country, and it is being increasingly adopted by fire, rescue, and tactical agencies as standard issue equipment. I carry one. I have carried one for many years. It is the most versatile strap out there. Check it out, the multi-loop rescue strap by Anderson Rescue Solutions. Tim Anderson, the owner and proprietor of Anderson Rescue Solutions, has become a dear friend. In fact, he's even been on the podcast several episodes ago. Dropped incredible information. He's super passionate about the fire service, about special operations, and he has built an incredible company, an incredible product. So because of our great relationship with Tim and Anderson Rescue Solutions. If you go to andersonrescue.com, you'll get 10% off if you use the promo code NFR2023. That's NFR2023 at checkout on andersonrescue.com. You'll get 10% off your order. And do me a favor, go over to their social media and check out Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for weekly news, product info, and other content in regards to Anderson Rescue Solutions. This episode's brought to you by Flame Decon. Developed specifically for firefighter decon, Flame shampoo, body wash, and soaps reduce your risk of getting occupational cancer. Live fire testing shows that carcinogens on your skin after a fire are removed and undetectable after using Flame. Flame Decon has made a product that not only does its job and does it well, but that you'll enjoy using. They smell amazing. They make your skin and hair feel great. I will be an absolute witness to that. I have used the product. Tara and I have known each other for quite some time. She has sent us product. We have used it, and it does take that smell of soot and smoke off of you immediately following a shower. It makes a difference. You can find Flame Decon products at flamedecon.com and use promo code NFR for 15% off your first order. That's promo code NFR for 15% off your first order at flamedecon.com. And for departments that are interested in departmental orders, more than one or two pieces of product, you can reach out to Tara directly at tara@flamedecon.com. She's happy to entertain any inquiries that you have. And this made me think departments need to protect their own, and protecting our own is also after the fire. Chiefs, purchasing managers, look into Flame Decon as a way of protecting our firefighters in and out of the firehouse. So check out Flame Decon at flamedecon.com. Use promo code NFR for 15% off your first order.
It was, but it also, this is kind of the interesting thing too, kind of cool as well. But fortunately, with the relationship with the top brass, it was easy to do. But with that, you have to do a self-assessment. You know, like you have to look at the mirror and say, all right, where do we lack? And you have to be honest with yourself. So, you know, my partner and I basically did essentially an audit of the entire fire department's training, from the newest recruit all the way up to the top. You know, going through state records, through the state database and stuff like that. And, you know, trying to accomplish, trying to aim towards the chief's goals of certain levels. And then also within, when we teach a recruit class, he had a certain, there's a level within New York State for teaching recruit firefighters as instructors. You know, he wanted that, for the goal was to have everyone in the academy staff to have that certification. So we had to look at that stuff, and there were some,
it's hard to do,
interesting conversations. And you know, you kind of have to find yourself, and then, because I'm kind of a history buff, trying to understand how we got here. You know? And part of that is we used to be known as the Buck Rogers Fire Department, very progressive in the 70s, and, you know, trying different things, a lot of innovation.
Telesquirts and mini pumpers.
Yeah, mini pumpers, telesquirts. We still have remnants of some of that stuff. Some has evolved.
Two-piece engine companies, man. I remember that.
I mean, we still have the two-piece engines.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We had the 135-foot aerial truck for
that's
our high rises.
That's
like a whole bunch of different cool things.
Yeah.
But then there's a missing piece between that and today. And studying it, and studying budgets, and studying, knowing the history and studying certain things, it wasn't one fire chief or administration's fault by any means. And this is the story of the majority of the fire service.
Absolutely.
In all reality. We've all gone through, different crises. Most of it financial, cities don't have any money.
Right.
Whether some of it's their own doing or not. And meds and eds taking over the tax base, therefore reducing the tax base. And it doesn't have to be, this could be any city. And then, of course, changes in administration. If a chief only lasts a year or two in a fire department, they're not going to be very, they're not going to accomplish a lot.
Right. Right.
So some of those things we realize were part of our story, but also the majority of the fire service, that's the way it is.
Man,
That's how we got there.
there's so much there, man. The fact that this is why a lot of these projects fail from the get, is that once you realize you have to do an internal look and audit on yourself, most people are like, we don't want to do that. And
it's funny you mentioned that, because the
Yeah.
first deputy and I were talking about this during the beginning of this phase, and he
Right.
said, a lot of times, there's tons of ideas. You know how it goes. Every fire
Sure.
department, we have tons of ideas. The toughest part is getting across that finish line.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yes.
And knowing that from being in other organizations and stuff like that, I couldn't agree anymore. But yeah, it's trying to figure out what the deal is, what the goals are, being
Yeah.
honest with ourselves, and then kind of coming up with that roadmap.
Yeah, and I think the roadmap is super cool, because once you figure that out, right? Once you're vulnerable enough to look at your deficiencies, what works really well and what's not working so well, and then you can find that common ground and everybody has buy-in, right? What you can do is really create a powerful program. And I think what's really impressive with your program, it's not just designed vertically, meaning it's not just for educating the next step in your career, meaning like promotion, but it's also horizontal, and horizontal means just bettering your own position. If you want to be a nozzle firefighter for 25 years in the city of Syracuse, we're going to help you get there, because we're going to put this in front of you to show you all the potential and possibilities that are in front of you, right?
Absolutely. And then there's another side of it too. Like,
Yeah.
this is something that and you and I talked about this on the phone earlier, like, with instruction, for example, for many years, we didn't take the approach of anyone can teach. It was more or less, they wanted some structure for the most part. It was typically wanted a lieutenant or higher to do a lot of the formal instruction. Well, you and I both know, I know some of the smartest people and the best people
I
in the
get it.
world
Yeah.
don't have crap on their collar. They're like, for example, I have zero credibility teaching pump operations, for example. I was never a first due engine driver. Right. And then when I drove Rescue One, I was responsible for 2 water cans, and that was it.
Yep.
So I'd be the last person on planet Earth to teach about pump operations, water in, water out. That's really the majority of what I know. And I could do it, but I'm not the guy.
Sure.
But that's where we need to tap into these senior, firefighters that maybe didn't want to go to the next level and be the perfect driver. We just had a driver retire recently. He was 30 plus years on the job, was the first driver for the majority of that, and was well known for his, attention to detail and actually creating and passing that torch and building younger drivers that became, senior drivers in time. And the fire chief was like, well, we need to really invest in our firefighters as well. So one of the things we actually did is we had a standalone fire instructor course for just firefighters.
Talk to me about that. That's pretty cool.
So we had so when all of our lieutenants we have our first line supervisor training course, they get fire instructor 1 within that program. Well, we realized we need to have more firefighters as instructors as well. So we decided, hey, let's do it. So we were actually working with Onondaga Community College, and we actually ran a firefighter only course, and we had people submit, because you have to pick people.
Right.
But we took several things into consideration, how we address, different issues of today, and, making sure we cover the broad demographic of the fire department, and making sure we're doing everything, the way things are supposed to be.
I get it.
It worked out really well.
And then this was to take firefighters that potentially it's more of an informal instructor. Like, you give them the ability to talk to me.
They all got national. They all are fire instructor 1s, national IFSAC, national fire instructor 1s.
Right, but it doesn't mean that they're going to become an instructor. It's to give them the tools.
Not necessarily.
Right.
Yep. It's the gateway, if you will. It's the gateway drug of instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
From there, within, they can take, they become under the system in New York State, under our MTO, they become MFIs or municipal fire instructors so they can teach within. And a lot of them may get the recruit firefighter series, the firefighter training series to teach recruits. Some might get like authorizations to teach pump operations, stuff like that, based
Right.
on kind of their lane, so to speak.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
what I love about that too, and kind of where I was going, I may have came across wrong, but when I said informal, it was more of also whether they're standing in front of a classroom formally or
yeah,
informal on a after a fire when they're packing, he's showing the next kid what he does on the fire ground as a chauffeur, as an engine chauffeur or something, like giving him the tools of understanding how to instruct also works on the
yep.
informal side because it gives him a better mindset of how to deliver what he knows to somebody. I mean, I just love that.
Well, it's funny. It's funny because I actually have two firefighters from my shift, from my crew right now. Um, I think they wrapped up at the end of last week. I don't recall. Taking a fire instructor one course, and we were talking about it out in the bays. They were asking some questions, and there's a little bit of nerves and stuff. Doing a new class and all that, and exactly what we were talking about earlier. I told them, I go, you guys are doing this already. You get a new fireman, you're doing the stuff informally already.
Yeah.
All it is kind of connecting the dots and putting that, putting it in a formal fashion with some other areas.
And giving them the
Um,
ability to put it on their resume, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you're giving them every tool they need to further their own education, which just makes them better. And that's what I think is so powerful about this. And what I wanted to ask was, once you guys developed this program, was there immediate buy-in from the membership of the department, or was there some skepticism in the beginning? Like, what is this
So,
about? What's this going to be? What do they want more
well,
from us?
you want to talk about striking while the iron's hot.
Okay.
So there's two parts of it. One of them is first the initial, oh, this is just going to be for the rescue heroes. You
There
know
you
what I mean?
go.
It's going to be just for the people with all the tech certs,
Yep.
or it's just going to be for the vertical, for the bosses. And one of the things we worked on um, with that is it obviously has to encompass everyone. And then we were right at the striking point also where our union and the city were in contract negotiations.
Okay.
So they were able to get a financial incentive program tied to this
Yeah.
as well in the labor contract.
Right.
And that was part of the buy-in. So it was, like you and I talked about before, people have different levels of motivation, different reasons for motivation. Um, and because there was a financial buy-in on one end of it, people were like, "Oh wow!" But it really did change the culture. I have to say, within 6 months,
It's
easily.
awesome. Well,
Um,
you said something earlier which I thought was really cool, and you were talking about those two guys that were on the floor and they were asking some questions and talking about it. But like you said, ultimately, you hear so many people on the job now talking about furthering their education, or they're involved in classes, or they're pushing
so
themselves further.
years ago, it was only like the rescue guys or the personnel at the hazmat engine 5 and truck 3, the hazmat company.
Yep.
It was just those two companies or anyone that was a volunteer outside of work, and that was always hush hush on what they're doing outside.
Right.
Um, those are my people, or like the fire nerds like myself. We're the only ones really talking about doing stuff, but kind of on the DL. Well, now you go any given firehouse. It's some firehouses, company captains have taken schedules of the state master list of different classes, and they've posted them in the hallway. Like
Wow.
we have our training division is very active with posting stuff on our SharePoint, our network, or our shared drive where we can put stuff out. So every firehouse can access via computer, different schedules, the handbook with professional development, all these different areas. And then they will send out, if there's a particular course that comes out, they'll send out like an interest email. Hey,
Yeah.
there's this, for example, a fire instructor one coming up, blah, blah, blah. Email the training division if you're interested. And we'll get you more information, so it's a big cultural thing. It's huge. Obviously when you start something different, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be ugly. It's not perfect. It hasn't been perfect. It's not going to be, but from where we were a couple of years ago, it's amazing.
You have absolute buy-in from the top down and the bottom up. doesn't get any better than that, right? I mean,
Well, the other thing too is because you're also going to have the people that are kind of caught in the middle. And
sure.
what I mean by that is, you know, New York State, like a lot of states, is very unique in how our, some of the certification processes are. But what's going to happen is all the newer people that, like, let's just say the class that started last year, they're not going to know any different.
That's it.
Just like the people before us, the guys that I came on with, we knew that, when I came out, rigs were red. Yes, we still had some yellows out there, but rigs were red. The guys that came on when the rigs were yellow, they didn't know any different.
That's right.
The guys that came out when the rigs were white and then changed to yellow, that was progress. Not everyone was happy. Not everyone liked it, but that's how you move forward. It's always going to change. Whether we like it or not. You got to either get on board or it's time to go.
I love that, and I just wrote it down, progress, because I agree with you 100%. I was just talking about this the other day in another podcast where I'm like, the guys that are coming in today don't know any different. And so you've created a culture now that promotes X, Y, and Z. And so the new hire coming in or the new volunteer walking through the door for the first time doesn't know anything that led up to that. All they know is what is here and moving forward. And then we educate along the way. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, progress, you could ask 1,000 firefighters what progress is, and you get 1,000 different answers.
That's right.
But I think it goes back to the whole. There's a couple things. There's progress as in keeping up with the times, and then there's progress keeping up with the times and making the job more efficient and effective, and truly understanding what it's all about. And sometimes just painting the rigs a different color isn't necessarily progress.
Right.
No,
I get
it. Sometimes we change the fire service, not my department. Sometimes as a fire service, we just change stuff to change it. And you and I both know that always isn't progress.
New terminology, new way to look at something. It's still the basic fundamentals, but hey, let's add another word or an acronym or something. Yeah, I mean, that shit's happening all the time.
Don't get me going on acronyms.
I know. But no, and I know where you come from, right? And I get that. That's why I said that, because that is a lot of what's happening today. I mean, I really believe that the core principles of the American Fire Service are all found. We know what they all are. Now it's how people are packaging them. And a lot of what you're getting today is just repackaged stuff built on the foundation of what's always been a core principle of the fire service.
I think one of the big things, and this helped us during this process, along with, doing that audit and stuff like that. And this applies to the entire fire service. It's kind of cliche, but you really don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. You really have to study the history. So you got to know the general history of the fire service, but your own organization, you got to know how you got to today. Because if you don't know that, whether it be like in our department, for example, understanding the modernization in the 70s when we, reduced the number of engines, started the two-piece companies with the telebooms and, going all over the Sutphen Towers and all that stuff, and understanding when they added the fourth shift, and just understanding the history on how you got to today, and even the bad times, understanding different levels of cuts and what happened to that. That's the only way you can truly move forward.
How do you, I know you're a big historian. I know that you are very protective of the history of the Syracuse Fire Department. And I know that you know a lot about what has transpired over the many years that have gotten you guys to where you are today. I just know that about you. With that, though, do you find, because of these programs you guys are putting in place where you're promoting your own people, that there's more of a buy-in, that they want to know more? I think a lot of times people don't really care. They don't care because there's no reason or incentive for them to care, and so they just don't care about the past. And I think it's so important. And for you, being a historian and somebody that, for what you just said right there, is very powerful. I talk a lot about that, knowing where we come from. You can't move forward unless you know where you've been, right? And so believing in that, are you finding that more people on your job are more interested in what has transpired over the years, the generations before? Or are you influencing people? Do you, like, who's going to be there after you leave to talk about why the rescue company wears white helmets? Like, who's going to be there for that?
Well, that goes back to us just spreading the good stuff to the next
Yeah.
person in line. You know, it
Yes.
really, we have there's another firefighter on the job who actually does a lot of the historical stuff. Um, and you know, we're working, there is a small museum locally. You know, we're always trying to get certain things together and more formalized so people can understand. But it's stories. It really comes down to, you know, when you're sitting at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee, talking about what's going on for the day. You know, that's why these firehouses need to have old pictures in the firehouse
Yes.
of different crews, different fires, different rigs. Because like at Eights right now, there's a picture from I believe it's the 20s, of the engine in the truck at an alarm, clearing up from an alarm. Um, and it promotes, you know, conversation. People talk about it occasionally. Hey, what do you think they were doing back then, or whatever? You know, you just gotta, you know, I think company pride and history and
Yeah.
something as simple as old pictures start generating the conversation.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be there though to answer some of it, right? And that's what's really important though is that, like you said, just passing it forward through conversation. I mean, you know, just those nuggets that are important, and let those stories run wild, right? Like, you know, share a couple tidbits and then watch somebody else. I have to think, and I've seen it myself, it's when you tell somebody something and then you come back around the corner, you know, a day or two later, and that kid that you just told something to is now telling somebody else. Like that to me is what we
Right.
need to do a ton of. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, so progressing through your fire service career and always looking for more, if you will. I think that's how you are. You developed a training company, Take the Door Training, right? When did you?
Yes.
Yeah, let's go down this road a little bit because, you
This
know,
is quite the rabbit hole.
I'm sure, and I can truly appreciate what it takes to do what you do when you run a training company. I know a lot of guys that have training companies across the country, and so on, and I know how much work and passion has to go into it. What got you to fire off that idea of like, hey, here's an idea. Like
So
I got enough time in
so
my
this
world. Let's
wasn't
start a company.
so I can't take full credit for
Mm.
it. So this took some doing. Around 2009, I was actually hired by Brotherhood Instructors. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
Brotherhood
of
Instructors.
course. Hmm.
We had a Canadian division, a U.S. division. Actually, we had two U.S. divisions. They took me in 2009, and that's really where I started. Uh, that's really where I really started getting started really teaching,
Okay.
um, and meeting tons of people. Well, without getting into details, um, they're not around anymore.
Right.
You know, the company itself.
Hmm.
But with that, a lot of the guys we all teach together still. So I was kind of selling props, and we started a company called Take the Door Props. We were selling all sorts of stuff, through the lock, hinge props, around 2000, I think around 2012, 13. And we kept getting these requests. Hey, you guys should come, you know, do some forcible entry with us, you know, to show us the props and all that. Yep, no problem, no big deal. By this time, probably around 2014, you know, we were slowing down quite a bit with Brotherhood Instructors. So, you know, people kept asking us stuff. And so we just started doing a little bit
Right.
more. And then it just kind of took off. You know, one of my buddies was like, you gotta start doing your thing. He's like, you're just holding yourself back. So 2015, we started really doing forcible entry, doing forcible entry and machinery rescue for years with Brotherhood Instructors. Um, People like, you know, it just, yeah, no, it went from there, and we
Yeah.
just
Right.
kept going.
Well, I will say this. I mean, knowing, meeting you, attending the conference. So you guys then Take the Door Training throws the heavy rescue conference in Syracuse. It's your instructor cadre, and you bring in a lot of people from outside your own network. But you have
Yes.
connections all over the country. And I have to tell you, so I was up there not this past year, the year prior. I snuck up for a night And I was there, and I remember checking in, coming down. I was in the bar, and I don't really know anybody there other than, you invited me up for the night or whatever. And so I really didn't know anyone. And so I walk in the bar, and I just looked around, and I could not believe the people that were there. I was like, this is a sleeper conference no people need to know about, because you have some of the biggest names in the American Fire Service there teaching and doing hands-on. And I was floored by then what the conference really, how it was built out, in the personalities you had there. And it really speaks to who you are and how very much entrenched you are in the training fabric of the American Fire Service. And this is absolutely me promoting you right now, because I didn't realize the reach and grasp that you had and the connections and the friends that you have. And it's through your own, due diligence of hustle and hard work and wanting to promote training. I mean, it's huge.
Well, part of it, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and it could be any, conference you could think of, is a lot of them turned into, very corporate. And I know that that's starting to come back away from that. You're starting to see where the big boys are starting to turn away from, getting back to the nitty gritty
Yes.
of why these conferences are.
That's right.
Which is great. I think it's awesome.
Putting the firefighter first.
Absolutely. But one of the things that we were going through is like you said, everything was a wide brushstroke.
Yeah.
And the rescue guys, or the special operations tech rescue people, there really wasn't anything there. There's some great programs out there. For example, we do like the South Windsor Rescue Fire Weekend in Connecticut in April. One of my good friends started that one up. There's a lot of great weekends out there, but the big conferences, they're just kind of, I don't want to say alienated, but it wasn't very encompassing, and people weren't, a 4-hour program is good, but think about what you're going to do in the rescue world for 4 hours in instruction.
Yeah. Right.
So with that, we thought, go back to kind of our main goal of the nitty gritty rescue work, thinking of the different disciplines and bringing in people that, that's their field. And everyone at the heavy rescue conference, they're not all take the door guys, because they can't. We don't do everything, and we don't want to do everything. But knowing people in our industry that, maybe do certain things or have a specific program that we know is top notch, why would I not bring them in?
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where we started this whole thing of, let's bring the best of the best. Like, so for this year, for example, one of our speakers, actually on day one for the first day, it's actually going to be an 8-hour day. Chief John Norman is going to be speaking, and you know how that goes. Living legend himself. I remember reading his articles in Firehouse magazine, in 1998.
Yep.
I don't remember if he was a lieutenant or captain, but I could still remember a picture in it vividly, and hanging on to everything that he said in that article. So.
Yeah. How important was, like, you talk about the foundation of your department and knowing where you come from, but even our own fire service career, like, I think back to those days of reading the magazines in the 90s and late 80s, early 90s, right? I became a fireman in 95, and I just remember these names and these articles and just the pictures. And I mean, I could probably tell you, there was a time where I could tell you, whose apparatus it was, like what city, just by looking at it, right? Without even knowing a name, and knowing the authors like Chief Norman and John Salka and all those names, right?
Yep.
Like, and it's just to fast forward now, it's so important to me. And I hope that the generation today is really acknowledging who's influencing their career today, because, like, I know for me, that was those gentlemen and those publications were a massive influence on me.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So talk to me this year. So you got Chief Norman coming. He's going to be talking on the first day. What else do you have? So the conference is in Syracuse, New York, September 19th through the 22nd. The Heavy Rescue Conference, we'll promote it and put it out there for you, Auggie, so that people know about it. But I will tell you this. When I was there were guys from every corner of this country were there for heavy rescue operations. It was really cool to see. guys from major
Oh, yeah.
cities all over the country. What do you have going on this year with the conference?
We've changed some of the things up a little bit. You know how it goes. We ran. So originally we were supposed to be in 2020, but then this magic thing called COVID happened. So 21 and 22 were really our first 2 years. But we had to change some things up. You got to cycle new stuff in.
Sure.
We are bringing 16-hour advanced metal cutting back. That's actually one of our courses. Retired Assistant Chief Mike Bates and firefighter Andrew Broussard
Yeah.
leads on that. We got some great instructors in that course. We've got heavy lifting with Paul DiBartolomeo from FDNY in Connecticut, Custom Fire Training. Paul was with us our first year. Good buddy of mine, bringing a great course, heavy lifting to the program. What else do we have here? We've got Without the Protection of a Handline with Lieutenant Dan Gordon from FDNY and Flash Fire Industries.
Yep.
You see him all over the Northeast. Great program. Last year was our first year bringing that, and kind of addresses things about like door control, can confidence, more or less stuff on the fire ground versus technical.
Sure.
And another great program. We've got some other stuff. We got some trench stuff coming with Mike Tazarski. We have a few other loose ends that I haven't finalized yet. That's why people haven't seen much out there yet this year.
Yep.
I'm a little behind, but it'll be coming out soon.
No, I get that.
All nitty gritty, fireman stuff.
And it should be said. We said it before, and I'll say it again. To have a disciplined conference like this that focuses in on heavy rescue aspects of the job. This is a conference that if you run on a squad or a rescue company, this is a conference that is going to dial in on exactly what you guys do in house. And the
other thing too, though, is even if you don't. So let's say you ride on a smaller job, like the department I worked on prior to Syracuse, where maybe you're it.
Yeah, I get it. Yep, absolutely.
Because we all want to be on that disciplined. Everything's separated into defined companies and crews, and it may not be the case. So it fits all models. But if you're doing any type of rescue work, it's quite the conference.
No, I get it. And it's certainly a place. I mean, I was there, like I said, I walked the training grounds, and between a couple different locations, the heavy lifting, I mean, you had big rigs, buses, trucks, and then you had the vehicle extrication. There had to be, 50 cars littered across the area.
We had a lot of cars that year.
Wild.
That was
Absolutely.
quite the project.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, the logistics on a project like this is not easy, I'm sure. But, you bring in an incredible instructor group that are very good at what they do. And it's certainly a conference that, everybody that I saw there was like knee deep in it and getting their hands on it. And there was no standing around, waiting around. Everybody's put to work and their skills were tested. It was cool, man. It was a lot of fun to watch and to be a part of for a quick day that I was there. But man, I wish you tremendous success with it. I think it's a very necessary and worthwhile conference. And I think people need to get their asses up to Syracuse, New York for it. So Auggie, that's fantastic, brother. Good work with that. Take the Door Training. Where can people find you? How do they reach out to you if they have any interest in taking a conversation further with you?
You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or even just takethedoortraining.com.
I love it, man. Well, listen, I greatly appreciate you joining me. The hour goes very quick, and I really enjoyed my conversation with you today. And I'll be honest with you, it was a great way to segue into the week for me, because to know that a department like Syracuse, New York is buying into their people and pushing their people forward, and you were a part of that. That to me is awesome, man. It's refreshing to hear that there's still departments out there that believe in their people and their people believe in the department. So great conversation today, brother. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime, brother. You're always welcome. Hang right here. I'm going to sign off the podcast, and I'll come right back to you, bro.
Okay.
Hey, guys, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Auggie Matt, a lieutenant out of Syracuse, New York, owner and proprietor of Take the Door Training, and the man behind the conference, Heavy Rescue Conference, this September 19th through the 22nd, Syracuse, New York. Check them out online. Go to takethedoortraining.com. Check them out on social media. They'll be posting links to the conference And I highly recommend if you can get up to Syracuse, New York in September, it's definitely a conference that's worthwhile. A great conversation. Take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we are making the job better. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio. National Fire Radio.